Welcome to another episode of Inspire People, Impact Lives. Charity is often thought to be helping someone or something right now. By giving directly to solve the problem, not necessarily through financial contributions, it could be direct aid is generally aimed toward the needy or suffering. It also could be of your time. Philanthropy, on the other hand, is love of humankind. The act of improving the situation of others through charitable aid, donations, or the gifts that you have. And that also could be time. Today we are talking about inspiring people and impacting lives through philanthropy, and joining us is Dan Rashke, CEO and owner of TASC, Total Administrative Services Corporation, which is the nation's largest privately held third-party administrator of employee benefits. Dan has made huge impacts through his philanthropic work. It is something that is dear to him and is built into the moral fabric of his organization. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So I got to give a brief, preface to our conversation because we got to know each other through our work on HaHa's, Clinton Dix's Heroes Foundation, and we're able to go in on a library makeover room together. And we'll talk more about that later, but I want to give everyone, Dan and I really didn't get the opportunity to know each other. We've been able to get to know each other briefly through this and his team through this endeavor that we're going to go on, and that's going to come out in January at one of the local schools here. So really excited about that. So I already knew about this topic, and getting you in here, I told Chad right away, I was like, this is what we need to talk about. So really excited to get your insights today, and I hope our audience is jacked up as well.
And that's a great example of a byproduct of philanthropy, because now we get a chance to work together like this.
Yeah.
So that's an intangible value back to our businesses and our personal lives.
Right. It all intertwines. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing. What, who were key influencers in creating your love for philanthropic and why that is?
So real quick, born baby of 6 in Milwaukee.
So you're youngest?
Youngest,
okay.
Yeah. I'm the baby of 6, and born in Milwaukee, 6 months old, moved to a dairy farm in central Wisconsin. So I had the pleasure of growing up as a little rugrat, if you would, with older brothers and sisters on the farm. So a lot of times people say, you grow up on a farm, you must know what hard work's like. And I said, well, I could see hard work because of my family. So I had a chance to understand it and emulate it.
Oh, that's cool. So were you picked on a lot as the baby?
No, there was a little gap there, and I had my my guiding coalition, if you would, inside my brothers and sisters. So I had a few that made sure I was taken care of.
Good. So through that work, or that hard work, or at least perception of, is there anything specifically there that taught you the way of philanthropy and kind of formed your opinions today?
Well, a couple things happened. My mother and father were both very involved, whether it was 4-H and volunteering there. But then my father probably more so because it brought the business element into it as well as the personal. On the personal side, he intentionally joined the school board so that he could get a rule change to get a disabled neighbor picked up with the school bus, because the rules were the school bus couldn't go on this one road because it was outside a certain boundary. Huh. So he fought for that change, and I remember running into one of my wife's classmates who remembers that because it was his sister that happened. So that was something really telling. Another example is when he ran his insurance agency, he put together the celebrities, if you would, for Special Olympics when it moved from Milwaukee to Stevens Point, which was our home office. And at first, I just saw it as all the wine and dine celebrity, recruit them. They'd go out with the kids. But I had a chance at 15, 16 years old to participate with the athletes in camps. So not only did I get a chance to maybe meet somebody like Mike Reinfeldt of the Oilers who worked for the Packers, but I had a chance to run a camp with the athletes. And that was probably really what clicked for me, because I could see the byproduct of my time and energy put forth for this individual or these group of individuals that don't have the same advantages you and I have.
Yeah, that immediate impact you could see.
Yeah, right there. Very visual versus a behind the scenes or writing a check.
Yeah, I've done some work with the Special Olympics as well, and in those events, the joy you see on their faces, it's hard not to get caught up in that emotion as well.
Yeah, so very early on, I was led into it, I guess, from a personal perspective and from a business perspective.
That's cool. Was that your aha moment, or was there anything else early on that kind of stuck out to you as going, this is something I want to intertwine into my whole life?
Those are probably the two very visible things. And as our business grew, we started to look at what we should be doing as a business. And it slowly moved over time, but like your child growing, when they're in front of you, you don't necessarily see it. But if you go from point A and you go 20 years later, wow, where did they come from? So I think now we're at that wow moment. But no, there were no big impacts other than those first couple I explained. It was an incremental movement toward this position of strategic philanthropy.
Well, that's great. So let's talk a little bit more of a business question, but tell us about your journey as an individual and a business leader, balancing your personal values and running a business.
Yeah, so what I wrestle with this subject, and I tried to get my brain around it, and I created this thing called a spectrum of philanthropic commitment. And it starts on the personal side, where usually people get involved because their heart and their mind wants to do something, like I did with those athletes, And then from an active philanthropy, I labeled that when you bring your kind of stewardship to the table. So a little bit like church, Number one, show up. Number two, give of your mind, but then also open up your checkbook.
Yeah, resources.
So then I went there independent, and then you've got your corporate philanthropy, which is really more of your corporate social responsibility, and then strategic philanthropy is on the other end of that spectrum. So I have if the audience can visualize this color spectrum, there's this movement through these phases based on what you're trying to achieve.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. So what was it like working with your dad? You mentioned that in pre-show we were kind of talking about that, and we have some similarities there. So working with your dad and transitioning the company through a really difficult time, what changed and stayed true, and why?
Well, we did talk offline a little bit. Sometimes with family, you butt heads a little bit. One thing with my father is when I butt heads, we could still get aligned on the vision. And we had a difficult time in 2 points. One, we almost went under in the early 90s. Another difficult time is we had a major undertaking. And he did name me as CEO in 95. And it was when I was 30 years old, just had my first child and lost my mom and all that in one throw.
Oh, wow.
And my brother, who's 6 years my senior, was working with us. And I got tapped for the job. He did not. So that created a very interesting dynamic. But with my father and I, we could always anchor to some real core values or purpose driven. So it gave us an opportunity, even though we butt heads and we get disjointed in some things, you could always go back to your core. And then you'd find out, well, really, we're not that off base. It's just we have different ways of getting from point A to point, different methods due to various reasons, our inflection points and how we grew up or what we believe on the details.
So any major lessons from business almost going under in the early 90s or anything that come out of there that for some business owners or leaders struggling right now?
Yeah, if you were in a position where you're going under, we called it hunker down. And what we did is we hunkered down, we got focused on only one or two objectives, and we stopped spending money everywhere except the critical items, which is keep the lights on and sales efforts. And we drove revenue. It's ironic, we almost went under, and we were probably like 200,000 in revenue in the business, and then we're about to go under, and that was 92. And then in 95, I took over, and we were 4.5 million. So to give you an idea, we came off that bottom so hard, bounced up, that it drove us from nothing to now we had an organization with 4.5 million in revenue, tons of customers and staff, and we were scrambling then to keep up. But I'd rather have that problem than the first problem.
Yeah, and I think any of us would.
Yeah, but I say hunker down, get focused, and don't let anything get in your way.
And that's such great advice. Like what he just said there is take aim at those most crucial items, those top priorities, no more than 3. You said 2. So that's great. And then it was really a springboard or a launch pad once they hit in bottom, and like you said, and just take off from there. So the good things can happen if you stay focused on those and stay aligned on those priorities.
Yeah, and then the trick is once you get there, you can't stay on that single or 2 focus because you need to evolve the business and change, because if you don't do that, you're probably dead again. So then you have to start opening up and do things that are more thoughtful and innovative and maybe open up a few other objectives and goals. But once again, if that starts to hurt you, then you got to narrow again. So business is kind of like your body. It's evolving and changing, and you have to keep looking forward to make it better than your mind. But then at times you might get in a tough spot, and then you just got to focus.
That's really great advice. So I want to touch on the family aspect there again one more time, because in the Madison community, in the business community in general, it's like 2 degrees of separation. Growing up, I knew of a lot of family businesses. Being a financial advisor, I worked with a lot of family businesses. And it was natural for me because I was in somewhat of a family business. And I always say that family businesses at some level are dysfunctional. Like there is some level of dysfunction in a family business, no matter how many family members are involved, if it's just 2. But in yours, you had an older brother that didn't get tapped on the shoulder. How did you guys navigate those waters?
Yeah, I think the dysfunction is can be concerning and difficult. It also is what makes that sauce secrety and good. I was just at a Kellogg School of Business in Northwestern Family Business Center. I was sent there for 4 days immersion around family business. So sitting next to me is other independent directors, family owners, and you're talking 4th, 5th generation. 160 cousins owning the business, and
Holy cow.
a lot of darkness was being brought forth. And I remember one family person saying, wait a minute, it's not so dark. There's a lot of good things about it. Even though you're dysfunctional, you got love, you got trust, you've got a good family environment, and you have an opportunity to work together as a family. So even though we struggled, I think it wasn't about the personalities of the family. It was more about getting aligned on the vision. So if you have 3 people and one is not aligned in where we're going, the other 2 are, you're going to have a disconnect. So it ended up with my brother, he moved on, but we have a great relationship. And ironically, he just came back to work for me for probably the last 3 or 4 years of his career. So that was in the 90s. And it was probably in the best interest of the family that we did go where we went. Just like my father, there got to a point where I needed to buy him out because I could see his direction and my direction, which was always aligned and anchored, became fractured. It wasn't fractured because of personalities, it's just he was at a different stage in his life,
Yeah,
and I was at a different stage. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So I think you can relate.
Very much so. And now now I have my youngest brother, working with me. I brought him back a few years ago. He actually stayed away from my father and I and built his own business down in Phoenix, Arizona, where he, with Northwestern Mutual as well, but he wanted to stay away from us to grow it on his own. But he went to ASU, so it was a natural thing to grow it there. As we were growing so fast here and I was taking over, I needed help. And so I brought him back. But there's those times, even last night, he calls me. There was a problem later in the day. I got kind of heated. I was having a great day. And then there's this problem that gets dropped on me that he had something to do with. So I got frustrated and I said, you fix it. I was like, this is not my problem. I did not create it. You fix it. And he hung up on me. I'm like, son of a, like don't hang up on me. But no, it's one of those things where you deal with that kind of, like, a normal employee is not going to hang up on you. But your brother's going to hang up on you every once in a while. And it's just balancing that ego and pride and be like, all right, I just told him to fix the problem. As long as he fixes the problem, no issues. I don't even bring up that you hung up on me. But other than that, if he doesn't, then we're going to have an issue with hanging up on me and not fixing the issue.
Yeah.
So.
A good image of that is I had an image created for me for a different purpose. It was a prism, and it had a light going through and then diffraction of light into colors. And somebody said, that looks like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
And I look at a family business kind of like that. If you look at the songs on the album, it's got money, it's got different things in that family business, but the dark side might be one thing, but if you get on the other side, the light is very colorful and it fractures, and it isn't always dark and gloomy, even though there's characteristics of it that is kind of the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
Well, there's that other side, which is the light and the reflection and all the positive things. So just like your situation, you're on the dark side for a little bit, but then you'll get back around to the light side for sure.
Yeah, that's a very small issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Just funny because
exactly.
it happened last night and wanted to bring that up, as I'm sure a lot of family businesses go through that stuff. But were there any mistakes you made early on in your career as a leader, and what did you learn from them?
From a business perspective, in my decision making, I focus too much on efficiency and not effectiveness. So one of my business moves is I combine my sales organization that was going after two different markets, because I thought, well, it's silly. Why are they driving through the same towns when if I just had them meet with the two different segments, we'd be very efficient. And it really hurt us. And I remember working with my board of advisors, and my father was on that board, and they were coaching me, get away from org charts, think work design, get away from efficiency, think effectiveness, get away from cost cutting your way to prosperity, grow your way to prosperity. So those were probably a few of the things that came into play in that period, that right when I took over, like 95, there's probably a 5-year window if I had the opportunity to have those events. The other thing is, when asked, why did my father choose me? And I asked him before he passed, and he said, because you'll charge Pork Chop Hill. And I didn't really know what he meant by that. But what it was is, sometimes life or business, it doesn't work out the way you want. Sometimes you just got to go into the fight, whatever that fight is. Could be fight for your health, could be fight for your marriage, could be fight for sales, could be fight for survival. And he just felt that was an important piece. So then, instead of me shying away from that drive, that fanatic discipline to the recipe that I thought was a negative, no, it's not a negative, it's a positive. Now you have to temper it once in a while, so that not everybody feels you're just running over the top of them or you're micromanaging. But to have that laser focus, we're going to get up that hill, we're going to win this battle. Maybe war is not the best analogy, to use, but I think the audience kind of gets what I mean. Yeah, no,
I definitely get what you mean. And the crucial thing you said there about the board of advisors is, sometimes us as the leaders are too close to the forest to see the trees. And they're really pointing you in the right direction and say, you need to consider it this way versus this way. And not changing your overall mission, but just changing your aim.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful for those that don't have a board of advisors. You need it.
I would like to offer one other point, and that is surround yourself with people that are good, and surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. So I've been blessed to have a solid advisory group, whether they're formal or informal, and then a team working that in their areas, they're very strong. So we were able to shift our thinking from more tactical, operational to more strategic. Like even in philanthropy, the idea of being more strategic with philanthropy is a shift versus from just basic corporate social responsibility.
Agreed. It's been said that if you find yourself to be the smartest person in the room, you need to find a different room.
Yeah.
So that's key in creating that board and surrounding yourself with better people. So why did you make the decision to ingrain philanthropy and volunteer work into the culture at TASC?
It probably moves to that subject that I referenced, strategic philanthropy, on the end of the spectrum. Because if you can find an opportunity to take, if you saw an X and Y axis in your mind, and you look at your business interests on one axis, and you look at your social interests on the other axis, you're trying to find that convergence or sweet spot in your philanthropy. Yeah. So you're serving the social interest, but yet you're still a business. So the business has to be prudent, has to think of its customers, its employees, and the financial ramifications of that. So I'm a believer that still serve the business interests and find that sweet spot between the social and the business. Volunteerism is critical there. It reaches the younger people. If they can see the problem, they will then get behind the problem financially. It's a development opportunity. I actually see a convergence, if you would, a Venn model where you've got human capital development, philanthropy, and innovation. They all intersect. So we put together a whole slate of things that really fosters an environment for that business interest to be aligned with the social interest.
That's so good. I couldn't agree with you more. Some of the work that we've done, just when I took over, I was just thinking about this, like, you get hit up as a CEO or a business owner all the time, not only for philanthropic stuff, but just advertising in general. And so it could be, UW athletics, stuff of that nature. And it's cool to go to the Kohl Center or Camp Randall, and some of those companies get a lot of play off that. So when I was approached by that, I'm sitting there, I couldn't envision one client walking through our doors just because they saw a Northwestern Mutual sign at the Kohl Center. I just couldn't envision it. Like, I wouldn't do that. And I could be totally wrong. But where I saw a lot of play is if we could throw philanthropic events, charitable events, and spend advertising dollars there and bring our clients involved, and not only have our advisors do work, but have clients do work that raises money for the greater good. I was like, I could see business traction there. And so there's where I put our advertising dollars, is towards that.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you're on one axis of that graph and you're purely about the business with a little bit of social, well, that's job creation. That's a simple example. When you're on the social side and you write a check to that foundation or to that UW or whatever, it's really just a social interest, but you get a little bit of brand. I think when you brought together the event you're talking about, which is an event that's around a social item with your particular business, you are needing networking, relationship development, prospecting. So it's very logical that serves a business as well. TASC, the organization that Patty and I own and I run, isn't the same kind of business because we're across the nation.
Yeah.
We still have relationships, but it's not the same. So we had to find a different set of tools or a go-to market, go-to community approach than you did. But you're doing strategic philanthropy by making that decision.
Yeah.
Now, you're still going to create jobs over here for the business and place business to help me as your customer, which is going to serve our community. And you're still going to write checks because someone's going to ask you, and it's going to be for pure social. Don't stop doing those things.
Right.
But if you can find more movement toward that convergence of social and business, I think it does you and the community more good.
It just creates more emotional buy-in.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
And your listeners, I'm assuming, are people like me. They're people who might be executives in companies, and it's really about them finding their sweet spot inside their business, and don't do something because the other entity is doing it.
Yeah.
Find the thing that makes sense for their particular business model.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Don't do something just because your competitor is doing it. You're trying to one up. Do it because it makes most sense for your strategic vision. That's great advice.
If I could, I met a gentleman and he runs a philanthropy for his family business, and they place medical devices like in operating rooms, like operating tables and that. So their strategic philanthropy is when they sell new stuff, they pull the old stuff out and they don't let it get back into inventory in the U.S. because he says, if that gets back into inventory, then I can't sell somebody a new product. So he was purely focused on his business. So what he does is he takes those tables, ships them overseas via World Vision, and puts those used tables in these third world country hospitals. Now you got the social side, but he tied it to his business interest. So he's just pulling inventory out like people would take out a wash machine when you bought a new one, and you repurpose it with Habitat for Humanity. He was doing the same thing, and I found it very fascinating. But that's an example of it's got to work for his type of business.
And there's a tax benefit to it, so that's good.
Yeah, which is nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong at all. You just marry those things together, and you get the best of all worlds.
Right. Tax avoidance or tax incentives are a good thing.
I mean, they put them there for a reason.
Exactly, to cause the behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Use them. So now, going back to that ingraining philanthropy and volunteer work into the culture at TASC, I think just based on our conversation, this first question is really a no-brainer. But the second one, let's get into a little bit of that. Was this an easy decision for you? And then what were some hurdles that you encountered along the way?
I think it was an easy decision. As I said, it was kind of pathing incrementally. I do remember a vivid moment. We had supported the American Family Children's Hospital at UW, and they let us use the community room for a board meeting. And I had a theme around philanthropy, and I had a theme around our end game for our business. And I remember in that room, giving the tour, and the hospital gave the tour because we wrote a check. But I asked a question. I said I want to give our employees 40 hours of paid volunteer time because I was heading toward this more strategic philanthropy. And I wanted to check up and say, am I an idiot, for doing that? Because that's a lot of resources. 40 hours, there's 50 weeks, that's 2% of my workforce if they were to all go off and use it. And I remember the board saying, if not you, then who? So, and that was led by my father and a few other executives, and they kind of looked at it as that dropping that stone in the water and creating a ripple effect. We're actually seeing signs of that now. So one of the things that is really attractive to people in joining our organization is the 40 hours of paid volunteer time. So we pay them to go out and volunteer. So you could do a mission trip, full week, or you could do delivering meals on wheels and eat up so much time. So we create a flexible environment and paid, so you don't lose income. Then what we found is some people go beyond that. They invest in their personal time. So then we do dollars for doers for that and put $5 an hour, not a big sum, into an account that they can give away. What it did for the business is it gave us an identity that people could relate to. And if you have people coming into a service business and they care for people, I listened to your podcast with Sweeney, and that caring element. Well, that caring element transcends to good service.
Yeah.
And people who care, people who give, usually transcends to happiness, studies show. Well, happiness, studies show, transcends to productivity. Productivity transcends to economic gain. So if you follow the string, and there might not be a perfect cause and effect, but there's clearly a correlation in those studies. So there was like a light bulb that hit, and that would have probably been, I don't know, when did the Children's Hospital go up? Maybe like 2010 or something like that.
I was going to say about 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years or something. I can't even remember now, so time flies. But that was the trigger. So we started getting very rich in our elements inside our business from a philanthropy perspective.
Did anyone tell you were crazy?
There were a few at that table who was questioning the economic consideration, and because they were very bean counter-ish, more math, you know what I mean?
So you're saying you might have a CPA or two in there?
Yeah, which you want and you need, and you want that. And any board, you want them to debate the subject. So It wasn't a negative, but then when we walked out of there, we were all aligned on the decision. Now, a little hint to the people listening, a little thing. When you give 40 hours, everybody thinks, oh my God. The actual actuarial or the utilization is about 13 to 14%. Now, a lot of people can look at that and say, well, now that's a negative because they're only 14%. How's that a negative? 14% of 40 hours. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to share this information so that organizations, if they give up 2 days or 20 hours, actuarially, they'll know what that's really costing them if you have the CPA at the table.
Yeah.
But the intangible gain, I think, blows that away.
Yeah.
It's just hard to put the pencil to what is the gain of attracting that new employee that you didn't have to work hard to recruit? What is the value of getting another customer? I mean, you don't always know, but you could kind of guess what it probably is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way, as you looked at it, or as you were saying that, the way I looked at it, I was like, that's 14% of community service that's going into our communities that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course we'd always like more.
Yeah.
More money, more time, more resources. But the fact of the matter is there's 14% going that wasn't there before.
Right. And just like any business decision, if you feel your performance is 14% of those 40 hours and you want to make that better, you got to decide to make an investment, engage the workforce, and make 14% 15, then 20. But you don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, just like, make an investment in sales or efficiency. These are your choices. So it really creates an environment of truly aligning in a shared responsibility model, the employee, the company, the shareholders, and the community.
So what other ways can our business leaders, our listeners anyhow, any business leaders in the community use philanthropy as a strategy? Any other ways besides how you're using it? Because they may not either have the capital or know how to, or maybe even people power to create what you created.
Yeah. Well, a couple things would be, in the example I gave, there's a lot of hours because you have 1,000 people and 14% of 40 per. I mean, it's a substantial number of hours. So they might not want to do that. But the thing is, it's kind of relative to size. And you can design the plan to skinny it or make it thicker. So whether you have 6 people or 600, you can design that. The other thing that I would suggest from a human capital development standpoint is what we do is we try to encourage people to participate in boards. Mm-hmm. It's very good for development. When you're trying to develop your skills to lead or communicate, it's actually more tricky when you have a volunteer board, because you can't just direct them because you're their boss. So you've got to get really creative and good about how you articulate your message, how you inspire them. And if you think of the different leadership styles, you don't always want to be coercive in your leadership style or pace setting. You got to find a way to be visionary and be persuasive and democratic and all these other leadership styles. So what we do is we support, if people join a board, because they're usually asked to give money, our organization sets up a budget so that we'll pay or make a contribution to that nonprofit. So now you could take somebody making $30,000, $50,000 a year and get them on a board, and they're going to be more interested and more valued than us. So I get asked all the time, but I got so much talent sitting inside TASC, let's get one of these people, and they won't be fighting to show up because they've got a schedule that's too tight. So that's another little example. The easiest is just allow people to do payroll deduction giving. That's the easiest. Just allow them to give through a payroll deduction. Make that easy, out of sight, out of mind, and create some little opportunity to volunteer. Maybe it's a team event. Start small. Don't right away jump to, I got to keep up with other companies, a TASC or an AmFam or something like that. Design it small and then let it evolve in line with what you're trying to achieve on the social and the business side.
I couldn't agree more. And I would think even on top of that, create a small committee in your office. It's volunteer committee and or council or whatever you want to call it. And as you're saying that, evolve. Let the committee really kind of steer that. And you put out the vision and let the ideas flow. Allow that creativity to come about, and you'll see some really cool things happen.
Yeah, we have a TASC and employee philanthropy committee, so it's the same thing you're talking about. And it was kind of designed around the idea, let all the asks come into them and let them wrestle with the tension or the paradox regarding, do I give to this entity or that entity? So you kind of have a vision, but then they have to keep crafting it. And that's great skill development too. So that's a simple little move to get the human capital development for your business. At the same time, you're being philanthropic and you're allowing your brand through the good works of these people to transcend out to the community.
And as the business owner, because I just did this exact thing, it allows you to not have to feel the pressure of saying yes or no to everything. And when you can communicate, here's the vision. So for example, I'll use ours. My vision is for children. So 90, and specifically children's cancer research. And so we've aligned with Alex's Lemonade Stand. So our Northwestern Mutual, as a corporate office, chose that as the charitable cause that they're going to align themselves with. So they actually match every dollar that we in the field raise. So that doubles our impact. That was a pretty easy decision. Now the other 10% is still towards children. That's some of the work that you and I are doing together with Clinton Dix's foundation. They'll go towards raising the literacy rate here for underprivileged youth here in the Madison area. So, but now when people come to us and say, hey, will you contribute to this? Will you consider sponsoring this? We can say, does it align with this vision? Mm-hmm. If so, we'll consider it, go through the board. If not, I'm sorry, this is where our vision is right now. If that changes, we will let you know.
Yeah. And it positions, like you said, so that you don't always have to say no. Let others wrestle with that tension once in a while. The other thing is you can say yes, but not my time. I think you're better served to use Susie or Jimmy here who works in our organization, because you'll get their value, which is equal to, and in some cases, better than what I can bring. Yeah. Just because I don't have the skill set they have, or I don't have the time or energy that they might have, or even the passion for a particular cause. But it was interesting, your example of HaHa, you do when you go through HaHa's organization, you ended up right back at the same place, which is regarding children, because he's focused on those younger ages and literacy, and that sits nicely right next to your Alex's Lemonade, which I read about on your website or a blog, some posts that you had out there I learned about, which is awesome.
Chad. Good job getting that out there. Dan's seen it now. So, but you're right. I wouldn't have said yes to being on the board for HaHa if it didn't have to do with kids. And before we got involved with Alex's, it was with March of Dimes, because we had a preemie with our first child. And even before we were with that, my parents were involved. So it was really ironic how that worked out. Then our daughter's born 5 weeks early, and thank God she was healthy. And
and was able to not require any time in the NICU and any of that. But it was so ironic at that time, all of the money and time we spent with March of Dimes and all of that work I saw in real time, real play happen right in front of me with my wife and daughter. And I was like, it was just amazing. So that's a little bit of backstory on some of the kid stuff I've gotten involved with, but pick your, where's your passion, and then go from there.
Well, if I can go back on your haha example and then jump there is, I think sometimes people think that, you have to be always just altruistic and only giving. And it's okay if you have a little fun, like the haha thing. It's cool. You can have fun. It's football oriented, but you're still focused on the mission. Just like it's okay if the business gains from it. It's not a negative as long as we're still leaning into the purpose. I think our foundation and my wife and I, we went into the kids. We did come at it from a healthcare. And the reason is I felt that I had a certain degree of domain intelligence about healthcare because our business makes healthcare more affordable. We help people pay for medical expenses through various tax advantageous accounts, health savings accounts, health reimbursement arrangements, flexible spending accounts, dental reimbursement, you name it. So we felt that's where we should go. The problem with that is it really didn't stimulate the fire or the passion, because if you shift on that spectrum back to the personal side, we're going to be more about children, and then we're more about disadvantaged populations or social justice. And part of that is because our children, who are now 21 and 23, are now active with us with our family giving. So we brought them in to develop their skills around a boardroom at the Family Foundation. But then when you do that, all of a sudden they start opening up your eyes to things that, in my little world as a 53-year-old, I thought I understood. I don't. My daughter and my son, mostly my daughter, though, in this case, understands the impact of these disadvantaged, the social justice issues, and she's going deep there. So then I look at it and say, she's bringing us smarts, and I'm going, her passion is there. So we kind of took the family or the personal and blended it together and came up with this mission driven toward the children in healthcare and toward the criminal justice. The other thing is I sit here and go, at 53, I'm on this earth for only so long. If that 21-year-old is getting into something and we can back that, some of the solves here are not short-term problem fixes.
No, it's your legacy.
And these are very difficult issues. Yeah. It might take 20 years.
And your kids can continue that fight.
They can continue because she's in it. I don't know if I can in 20 years. I don't know if I'm going to be here.
How cool is that to see in your daughter?
I'm a very proud father. Yeah, it is. It is the coolest thing. And my son, he just approaches things a little different, but she's very soul-based in her thinking. And I think there's something there because of maybe your mother and father, Patty and I, but really I got to give it to her and her influencers beyond us that caused her to go there. Yeah. She's more of a poster child than we are when it comes to this idea of true philanthropy, which if you go back to your definition at the beginning of the show.
That's really cool. So I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum with 7531, but you start seeing those attributes in your kids and you try and teach them and raise them the best way you can, and then you get someone to your age of your daughter and she's teaching you stuff and showing you her heart that's goes to the way you raised her, and then her becoming her own woman as well. That's really cool.
My advice to you and your listeners who do have the younger children, because we're way past that and empty nesters, is at those ages, just involve them a little bit and they'll start to see, and you'll model it to them, just like I saw what hard work looked like on the farm, but I wasn't really working hard because I was little and scrawny. They are going to see you and what you do, and they'll model and pattern. The other thing is they are so smart, and they are not afraid to just say things, boom, the way they are. Where you listen to them, where we're all guarded, because we got to think of all of our relationships and our business and all this. So, we've got to watch out. The kid just boom right there. They'll be really, and then you open up your eyes and go, well, that was really simple. She or he saw that better than I did because I got all lost in the minutia.
Yeah. So how do you see the world of giving? How's that changing?
Well, there's a lot of things that are happening. Some people say, well, giving's going up. Well, yeah, dollars are going up, but you got all these mega donors. You got the Zuckerbergs or whatever, and they get all the press or whatever. The problem is, on the flip side, is individual donors are going down. And I think with the millennials, there is a need for them to be more engaged. So there's a shift toward volunteerism. Because like Director Keith Willingham, he runs the federal government's combined federal campaign. And there was an executive order to track volunteer time that was pledged by employees. And I asked him one time, I said, why is that? And he says, well, when you go into the younger populations and if they volunteer, again, if they can see the problem, Dan, they'll get behind it with their checkbook. So the two correlate. So I think there's a movement toward volunteerism. That's pretty clear. There's a movement toward more of a donor-centric model. If you go back, everything was around the nonprofit. There's total shift. And the other thing is the idea of having giving being part of your benefit package, which is probably why we got further involved, because being an employee benefit administrator, we could see it. Our domain intelligence allowed us to see it and actually enable it. So a lot of our strategic philanthropy is around helping employers make giving frictionless, make it easy to come off the payroll, send it off to your nonprofit, which is what we do for the federal government, right down to a two-person company.
No, that's great. So you have this internship program. What is your philosophy around the new internship program, and what do you require from your interns, and then what do they require from you?
Yeah, so with the internship program, until maybe like 2-3 years ago, we didn't have much of anything. We didn't really know what we were doing. My kids would come into the company and we'd have, take your kid to work day and that kind of stuff. My son just wanted to do construction, which I think is great. And his mom, Patty, said, that's good because, Dan, when you grew up on the farm, you kind of knew how to use a hammer. So you're not totally inept. You can do some things. Yeah. Not that I'm Mr. Fix-It, but Quinn was able to learn those things. Well, what we did is we saw Quinn go work in an internship program at Exact Sciences, and he got a chance to hang out with Kevin Conroy, and they got a great program. So he came back and gave me what they do, and so did Kevin Conroy, the CEO. So we modeled after that and started building out an internship program, and now it's a little more robust. One trick for us is that we're all over the nation. We only have 300 to 400 employees here in Madison. The other 700 to 800 are across the nation. So that's a little bit of a trick for us with the internship program. But we've taken it further. We actually have some internship programs that work with like the YWCA or the Urban League, and we are part of the YWeb program, where we have internships for adults that are trying to develop skills so that they can get to gainful employment. So we once again have taken the internship program for the young people coming out of school, and we matched it with an internship program, again going after those disadvantaged populations that just don't have the opportunity to participate with companies like TASC, or to sit next to that very smart computer science graduate who's in the same program. So by osmosis, there's a sharing. That smart young person is understanding what this person's world's like, and this person is understanding from that smart young person what computer science is really about, because they were afforded a formal education around it.
That's super cool. Now, another really cool piece of this, didn't you mention that there's something philanthropic intertwined with it as well?
With the intern? Yeah, that piece would be the giving element related to the YWeb and the Urban League. That's the piece. Because these individuals, they're being placed because they don't have a job. It's a paid internship, so they're getting funded and they have compensation, but they're developing a skill. Then what we do is we'll hire those individuals. So it kind of ties to our, also inside the company, it ties to our, we have a living wage too. So what we do is we make sure that nobody in the organization is making less than $15 or $15.50 as an example. So hopefully I'm in the spirit of what you're looking for related to the internship.
I would just encourage our listeners on the internship side, if you have one, if you think about creating one, intertwine it how Dan has with some of his mission work and the philanthropic side of things. B, I've heard, so we have a really big internship nationwide, and it's rated top 10 consistently. Main reason is they get to do what we do. They get to learn and do all the things that our normal advisors do. So they're not just paper and coffee pushers. And we hear that all the time from these college students as we're interviewing them. They even ask us, what am I going to be doing? These kids are smart, and they're being coached to ask these questions. So my short ask there is, if you create an internship and you invest in that, it's going to be a loss leader. It is not going to be profitable. I can tell you that because we run the numbers on it every year.
Yeah. In the short term.
Short term, exactly. Yeah. Long term, some of our most successful advisors, some of our most, actually about 50% of our field leadership nationwide has come from our internship program. It's incredible. So long term can be a great thing, and that's why Northwestern Mutual and myself as a whole has continued to invest in it. But by and large, don't be a paper and they're not there to serve you. They're there to learn, and they could be a long-term asset for you.
Yeah, make it meaningful work. Don't just give them the oddball jobs like you're talking about. Get a coffee. Example of that is SC Johnson, $11 billion organization. That's where my son ended up. He went into their internship program the next year over there. And what they were able to do when they gave him meaningful work, they were able to see out of 12 of these young people who they wanted. So they didn't have to worry. If somebody over here didn't have a work ethic or just didn't have that aptitude, I mean, you can only ask so many questions in an interview to figure that out. So like to your point, give them meaningful work. Then you'll be able to see what the aptitude is, the work ethic, some of your basic blocking and tackling of hiring. That's where the real richness is. So I'm right with you on that advice.
That's great. So another real cool thing that you've been leading the charge on, tell us more about the Greater Give and the Everyday Philanthropist Act. What benefits to employers and employees, what do they receive?
Yeah, so you asked earlier about trends out there. I think one of the dilemmas is with the way our tax structure is working is it doesn't democratize giving, meaning you've got to jump over the standard deduction hurdle to then get a deduction, and you're well aware of that. And I do that too. So I work with Northwestern Mutual. I put money into a foundation. It could be appreciated stocks. I liquidate them in there. So I take advantage of that. But I'm able to because I'm of an affluent group. The Everyday Philanthropist is really about allowing every one of those 135 million people in the workforce the opportunity to not just take money out of their payroll payroll deducted, allow it to be pre-tax.
Yes.
Give them an incentive to give. Now, people will say you shouldn't have to give an incentive to give. Well, if that's true, then why am I getting the incentive over here? So why it's not fair, it's not democratized. The other reason for the Everyday Philanthropist Act, by doing a payroll deduction pre-tax, the company will save Medicare and Social Security on their matching FICA. No different than medical, daycare, transportation, all these other benefits that I have an incentive to put forth into my workforce so that I can receive a gain. If you can get that employer to lean in, the Everyday Philanthropist Act gives the incentive for the employer to lean in to do the payroll, we can bring a ton of more people into the giving community. Because if they're afforded that opportunity with ease through the payroll, and if they're incented and the employer is incentive, it's a shared responsibility model. The employer is committing, the employee is committing, and the federal government is committing by giving us a break.
Yeah, and if you don't think the tax code is a behavioral code, you're fooling yourself. I mean, there's a reason you get a deduction to buy a Prius or a credit or whatever you want to call it. The other thing is with a 401k type thing, there's a reason it works because it's done right out of your check before you have a chance to spend it. It being in the financial advising world, we know the vast majority of people do not save enough money for retirement, for education, for any of their goals. But furthermore, it's because they don't have the discipline, and frankly, our schools don't teach them how to run a personal budget or any personal finance for that matter. So unless you take it upon yourself to become an expert or work with an advisor, that's the reason where we are. But to your point, if it can be just deducted from the check, like your insurances, like the 401k contributions, it's a win-win.
Yeah. So what happened is my wife and I, part of our strategic philanthropy, we decided to create the Greater Give. And the Greater Give is an organization that focuses on advocacy for this legislation. The bill is called the Everyday Philanthropist Act, and pleased to say it was introduced in Congress. It's actually House of Representative Bill 6616, and it is a bill that simply allows, just like daycare, medical, parking, 401k, it allows an individual to take money out pre-tax. So we've got bipartisan support. We have 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats introduced. More are coming on. Different backgrounds, different geographies. It's getting traction. We met with the IRS, Mnuchin's office, and the administration, and the IRS said they are in support of it, meaning they won't kibosh it if it can get through the House. There's a complementary bill on the Senate side, but all the bills have to be, it isn't introduced yet, all the bills have to be reintroduced when Congress turns over.
Yeah.
So it's there, but it'll probably be reintroduced in the next Congress as we go forward. And that's just the way, if you remember those schoolhouse rock days, I'm just a bill sitting here on Capitol Hill, trying to get passed in a law. That's where it's at right now.
Yeah, some of our younger listeners will have to YouTube that or something.
Yeah.
So that's on the state side right now, right? No, that's federal?
That's federal.
Oh, great.
That's federal.
I misunderstood that.
No, that's across the board. So that would be, it was introduced by Congressman Eric Paulson out of Minnesota, and our local congressman, Mark Pocan, is behind it. His office actually did a lot of the work in their legislative council to design the bill with us. So we actually participated in writing the bill. But I mean, if you're in this space for 30 some years and we just eat up and spit out regs and laws and benefits and all this, it was really easy for us to actually write the legislation because we just modeled after other fringe benefits. And if I could, the beauty of it is some people will say, well, you got it as employee benefit, you're an employee benefit company. Well, yeah, we use the domain intelligence to build it. But quite frankly, from a philanthropy standpoint, I don't care how the money gets to the charity.
Yeah.
If it's right next to your 401k deduction and the 401k administrator or Northwestern Mutual moves that money, great. If payroll company, ADP, moves that money, great. If the bank moves it, we don't care. We don't have to be involved at all. It's just logical that this idea of giving off the payroll deduction sits next to other employee benefit accounts.
Yeah.
And if I could, with that said, it isn't really an account like money sitting somewhere like an HSA. It's just a label of an account because you would require the employer to move that money to the nonprofit in a reasonable period of time, just like you do with your 401k.
Yeah.
You can't sit on it.
Yeah.
Move that money to the 401k so it starts working for the employee. In this case, move that money to a nonprofit so it starts working for the community.
That's awesome. So do you think in our political environment how polarized we are? I know it's bipartisan proposed. Do you think both parties will stand behind it?
Yes, I do. I think the trick is going to be whether or not it goes in as a standalone bill or it gets tucked into some kind of reconciliation or whatever. Yeah. The score on it has not been done, so people are asking the economic, but the advice of the Treasury, Mnuchin's office, the IRS, said reduce the max from, let's say, $5,000 down to $2,500. That'll help on the score. The other thing was really good is they said think of like a millennial act. So package maybe student loan repayment with this and family leave. So you're reaching that younger population that is needing to address those issues. Their problems are different than our problems. And you already have tuition reimbursement, but when you're getting these ready-made smart kids, you're not sending them to school. They're already educated. Yeah. Their problem is they're saddled with debt.
Yeah.
So why not allow them to package a program where they could put some money in their 401k, some money in giving, some money in their student loan repayment, because it's kind of hard to think about my retirement when I'm saddled with the debt. So we see a lot of momentum, but it's still a crapshoot when you're trying to get a bill passed. It takes a lot of energy. But if your audience, if you can support us, that would be awesome. You don't have to write checks. You just get behind us so that we can demonstrate that the community of business owners, nonprofit individuals are asking and demanding this type of legislation.
So where can our listeners go to find out more on the Greater Give?
They can go to thegreatergive.org. So that's all one word, thegreatergive.org, and you can sign on in support.
And that's, I think, a great point. If you haven't been involved in the political process ever, your representatives are going to be the ones that are going to vote on this. So giving them a call, referencing the bill number you gave, what's that again?
That's HR 6616. It's called the Everyday Philanthropist Act.
So that's what they speak to. It's highly unlikely when you call an office you're actually going to get your person, senator or Congress, but you will get their chief of staff, one of their staff members. And I'll let you in on a little secret, having been to D.C. many a times. The chief of staff in D.C. is usually the one that knows the most and tells the senator or congressperson what to vote on. Because if you think about it, it's impossible for the senator or congressperson to know everything about every bill that's going on out there. When you take a step back and you're like, why aren't these people that educated? It doesn't seem like they're that educated. It's impossible. So they have staff people that get educated or on a certain number of things to help educate the lead person to make a decision, yes or no, on the vote.
Yeah, I don't envy those folks.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
It's a thankless job.
So I always ask this now, what book are you reading right now and why? And it doesn't have to be related to this topic, but just maybe it's a leadership or maybe it's just a fiction for fun book.
Well, I was introduced by Amy, and I'm going blank on her last name right now, of design concepts in town, of a book called Communicating the New, and it was written by Kim Irwin. And that was very helpful as you think about an organization like ours who's very innovative, and I talk about the strategic aspect of innovation, philanthropy, and those type of things. What we found, because our organization is now going to be introducing a new universal benefit account platform to administer these various accounts, our issue is not how good it is or whether we got a good idea. What I'm finding is, how do you communicate the new? If you go back to like Apple with the way we buy music now, before that occurred, how would you communicate the new? Or when a car was introduced, or the combustible engine, the issue isn't whether or not you have a good idea anymore. There's a lot of people with good ideas. You have to be effective on communicating the new. So that's a great book. Its subtitle is Methods to Shape and Accelerate Innovation, because having a good idea and you're trying to push it is different than having a good idea and people are demanding it. If they want to eat it like candy and you found a way to appeal to their emotion and their beliefs, it just takes off. What I found is that's also a leadership trait too, because if you have an idea in a direction, you can use coercive and push, but if you can create a better vision or a compelling reason for people to go after something, communicating the new and why it's beneficial to them, they'll pull you through that change.
Oh, that's
so it's very good.
Oh, so you brought up Apple and how we buy music now. So my brother texted me this yesterday and said, want to feel old? The first iPod came out 17 years ago today.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's many things that we can say and make us feel old, but that was just as you were mentioning the Apple. I was like, oh, yeah. My brother Jake texted me about that yesterday. I'm like, that's crazy, 17 years ago. So at that time, I was at Best Buy as a sales manager. But that was my career before this, trying to stay away from my father.
Yeah.
So I was in retail when that first came out, so it's just fun.
Great experience. If I could, I started in Holiday Inn as a busboy and a server, and then moved to selling insurance before what it is now. That Best Buy experience is a great experience because you figure out quickly how to treat people well and care for them and help them and be servant in your mindset, while knowing that I still got to close it to make sure I keep my job and make a decent pay. So
make a decent living. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It taught me a ton in being a boss and making some mistakes there versus having to make them here when it was a much more intimate setting. And I don't envy anyone that still does that, because Black Friday every year, which is coming up here, is a reminder as to why the heck I don't do that anymore. So that's good. So last question, we'll get out of here so you can get on with your day. What is the best way for any one of our listeners to get in touch with you, your staff, if they're inspired by any of your messages today?
Well, I would say because they might be interested in things around philanthropy, or maybe about our business or an opportunity, or maybe want to talk to me. I'm fortunate I got a great group of people that handles family business, philanthropy, the business, communication. So I would say go to CEO Office at tasconline.com. That's CEOOFFICE. ceooffice@taskonline.com. The reason I do that is so that people are assured that they get a thoughtful response in a timely manner, because as you can imagine, and you probably have this too, a large volume of communications come in. The other thing is based on what their interests are. I might not be the best one equipped. It might be like that senator you mentioned. I need to get the person to my chief of staff in a particular area, and they'll actually get a more meaningful, thoughtful, and probably more valued answer than what I can maybe do, because I'm flying around on different things.
And you have a phenomenal staff. I can always tell a lot about a person before I even meet them, getting to know the people they hire. And Jennifer, who's sitting here with us today, she's awesome, been awesome to work with. So I want to give a quick plug again. Dan and I are partnering on AHA's Heroes Room. It's coming to one of the Madison schools. We're not going to give out too many details right now, but keep an eye out for releases. It'll be here in January. We're going to enhance one of the local schools that TASC and Northwestern Mutual are partnering on to invest in that, to invest in an upgraded reading room. Think of it, HaHa likes to describe this as home makeover for a library. So we're excited to bring you guys that. Thanks for everybody for listening today. Thank you, Dan, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.